to Two Wives of John Steinbeck by Carol Marquart. I'm Carol Marquart. This stage reading is based on a real incident that happened in June of 1941. John Steinbeck, who does not appear in this play, brought his girlfriend, Gwyn Congor, to a house in Monterey and introduced her to his wife. Now, this was quite a surprise for both women. After that, John Steinbeck drove away. The cast includes Teresa del Piero as Carol Henning Steinbeck and Andrea Mcdonald as Gwyn Congor. I'd like to thank the Monterey County Theater Alliance that helped put this production together, and David Thon, who is taping this for the Carmel Foundation. And by the way, David Thon is the voice of John Steinbeck. So without further delay, the Two Wives of John Steinbeck. Thank you.
I hadn't seen John in months. Suddenly, I got a call. "I have to see you," he said. John sent me an airplane ticket from L.A. to Monterey. It was an early flight, so I arrived in Monterey about 8 a.m. John picked me up at the Monterey airport, and we stopped off at a place called Western Biological Laboratories. John wanted me to meet his friend, Ed Ricketts. We talked for a long time about all kinds of things over coffee and donuts and beer. I liked Ed very much. Afterward, John wanted to show me the new house he had built and bought. It was on Erdley Street in Monterey.
I heard John's car pull up on Erdley Street and the gate open. We had a pretty bad fight the night before when he told me all about this girl. I'd gotten back from my vacation in Hawaii just last night, and I was completely exhausted. I wanted to return to California from Hawaii earlier, but John said, "Oh, Carol, why don't you stay 3 weeks longer?" I should have been suspicious, but I extended my vacation with my sister in Hawaii. John picked me up at the airport last night, and I come home to this hellhole of a house. Why in the hell did John buy this shitty house on Erdley Street? I can't wait to get home to the ranch. I hear the car pull up, the gate open, footsteps, then the key in the latch. I go to the front door, and there they were, my husband and this girl. She was all dressed up, high heels, makeup, beauty parlor, perfect hair. It was cold outside, and she had no coat. Maybe this was that girl that John had told me about. I knew I had seen her somewhere before.
A tall, dark-haired woman wearing a sweatshirt and trousers came to the door. She was holding a champagne glass in her hand. I wouldn't have described her as being pretty or even very nice. I was introduced to her. It was John's wife. John hadn't even told me she would be there, but I couldn't run away at this point. I had to follow John into the house. The day was gray and foggy, and the house was shabby, tall, sagging fences, weeds growing all the way up to my knees. Inside, 2 dirty bay windows in the hall, one of them broken. The living room smelled of mildew. It was mostly unfurnished, the floor just bare wood with peeling wallpaper. There was a champagne bottle on the coffee table, 1 empty glass, and 2 badly stained stuffed chairs.
I did not ask her to sit down, but she did anyway. John slumped down in the other chair. I grabbed a packing crate from the corner and sat down. "Champagne?" I asked in my most pleasant voice. The girl shook her head. John mumbled something unintelligible. I felt a terrible sense of foreboding. What in the hell was John up to? Finally, John spoke up.
"Carol, this is Gwyn Congor, the woman I told you about. Gwyn and I have been seeing each other while you were away. Actually, we've been seeing each other on and off for over a year. We're in love. I want you two to talk this over. I know you both love me, but whichever of you ladies needs me and loves me the most, that's the woman I will have."
And then he stood up, and he walked towards the door, and I wasn't going to let him get away with this. I went after him and grabbed him by the coat collar. "Listen, you crazy, stupid Irish bastard. Who in the hell do you think you are, bringing this girl into our house? Who in the fuck made you who you are? Who told you those stories about the Monroe family and the pastures of heaven? You didn't even know where Corral di Tierra was. Who took care of your fucking mother in Salinas when she took almost a year to die? Who suggested the night of the round table for Tortilla Flat? Who gave of Mice and Men its title? Who willed the grapes of wrath into being and typed the goddamn manuscript 4 times, staying up until 3 in the morning? Who sat at the kitchen table day and night listening to every fucking word you ever wrote? I gave my life to you and you bring her into my house? You expect us to fight over you, you miserable son of a bitch? And what did you buy for me last Christmas? A 22 gauge rifle? Well, I think I know how I'm going to use it.
Scene 2. Carol Steinbeck is sitting on a wooden crate holding the collar of a man's trench coat. With her other hand, she is sipping from a champagne glass. She is in front of a locked bathroom door. Carol tosses the coat to the floor and refills her glass.
You know, eventually you're going to have to come out of that bathroom.
Why?
Because I may have to use the bathroom. You're going to have to stop crying and come out of there.
I'm not crying. I have asthma. It comes on really bad when I get upset.
Where have I seen you before?
I was at a party at Max Wagner's in Beverly Hills, Robert Benchley's party.
Oh, that's it. I thought you were Max's girlfriend.
No, I'm just friends with Max.
What is your name?
Gwyn Congor.
Oh, yes, I heard all about you last night for the first time. How old are you?
Why do you want to know?
Because you're in my house and you're trying to steal my husband.
I don't want to do that.
You don't want to do that? Then why did you come here?
John brought me here. I didn't know I was going to meet his wife. He didn't tell me.
How did you meet my husband? Through Max?
Yes, and it was a long time ago. Maybe a year ago, Max said he had a friend. And he said this friend named Mr. Brooks had become very famous because he had just written a book called The Grapes of Wrath, and that sold thousands of copies. Max said this book was so famous that he was going to turn it into a movie. Only Mr. Brooks was very sick right now, Max told me. He was also very depressed because he and his wife were not getting along. This famous man is holed up in the Aloha Arms Motel in downtown L.A. Max said, "You make the most wonderful chicken noodle soup. Will you make my friend John, Mr. Brooks, some soup and bring it over to him?" "Don't worry," Max told me. "I'll come with you."
I don't think you could make up a story like this. You made him the soup?
I did.
And then?
When I entered the room with Max, it smelled a lot like cigarettes and booze. John was lying on a Murphy bed.
Oh, now we're getting to the good
He
part.
told me I was welcome to sit down, but he really didn't like chicken soup.
Well, that's true. I could have told you that. John doesn't like chicken soup. His mother Olive used to make him eat it. He didn't like his mother either.
But he did eat my soup. Afterwards, I gave him a back rub,
You gave him a what?
and then I bathed him.
Oh, really? Max was still around?
No, Max had left by then. It was a sponge bath, but afterward, I could tell he felt a lot better.
I'll bet he did.
But I noticed something. He had the most horrible varicose veins in his legs.
He had a staph infection, for your information, little Miss Florence Nightingale. And let me tell you something else. Right after John finished the final draft of Grapes of Wrath and sent it off to Viking Press, he simply fell apart. The man had a nervous breakdown.
Why would he be falling apart after becoming famous?
Because John doesn't like being famous. And he's a crazy, sadistic, paranoid personality. The Associated Farmers, the growers, the shippers in Salinas wanted to smear him. They tried some trumped-up charge that John was a child molester. They threatened to cut off his balls and rape his wife. Everyone was accusing him of being a red.
A red?
Oh, my God, you're naive. You don't know what a red is?
I know what a red is, but John isn't a communist. I know that.
But everyone thinks he is. After Grapes of Wrath, the telephone started ringing all the time. Everyone was accusing him of something or other, or they wanted to interview him, or they wanted money, or they wanted him to autograph his book. Everyone in North America. Guess who had to answer the phone all the time? Guess who had to open all of his mail? 75 letters a day. Did he thank me? No. He developed an abscessed tooth and then got a staph infection in his knee. I got strep throat. I was sick as a dog and I had to go to the hospital. Then John started running off to L.A. to hide from all of his fans and from the people who wanted to kill him, leaving me alone at the ranch to fight his battles.
The Brush Ranch in Los Gatos?
Yes, for months and months. Say, how did you know about the ranch in Los Gatos? Did John take you there while I was in Hawaii? Did he?
Yes, Max Wagner and I visited the ranch in Los Gatos.
Did you sleep with my husband in my goddamn sheets?
No, I told you. I was with Max. We only stayed for the day. I loved your garden, though, the flowers and your vegetables and your swimming pool. You have a lovely house.
I don't believe that Max was with you. You're using Max as a front. So back to the Aloha Motel, the sponge bath. What happened after that?
After that, John started showing up at the nightclub where I sing. He could hardly walk. His leg was so bad.
Knee. It was his
He
knee.
said he had sciatica.
No, it was his
Oh,
knee.
right, his knee. Then he started showing up at my flat where I lived with my mother. He always seemed to show up around dinner time. Then the two of us would go to the little bit of Sweden restaurant on Sunset Boulevard for dinner. Only it was funny. When it came to time to pay the check, he never had any cash.
That's because I kept him on a tight leash. $35 a week. Otherwise, John would just go out and buy stuff. Well, you know, a swimming pool, a sapphire ring, a fur coat, a Packard convertible, and not just one new Packard, but two.
I'm really getting cold here. Where did John go?
I don't know. He took the car and left. You might as well come out of the bathroom.
If I do, will you hurt me?
I think so. After all, I'm not a very nice person anymore. Being married to John Steinbeck does that kind of a thing to
My
a person.
suitcase and my purse are in John's car. I need my purse. My coat is in John's car, too. Right now, I am wearing bathrobe towels.
Well, hang up my towels back on the towel rack. I don't want you touching my clean towels. Anyway, you can't have your purse or your suitcase until John comes back. Now come out of the goddamn bathroom and remember to hang up the towels.
No, I'm not coming out of the bathroom until John comes back.
Okay? I'll tell you what. Unless you want me to break down that door, we're going to decide here and now who gets John Steinbeck. I can tell you one thing. It won't be you.
Why not? I can make John happy. You can't. You don't. John needs peace and quiet. John says you're always fighting and arguing with him. He says you get violent sometimes.
He told you that? Did he tell you how much I deeply and truly love him?
No.
Of course I love him. At least I used to.
Well, I imagine it was love at one time. How did you first meet John?
That question is, how did I meet John?
Yes. How did you meet John?
You really want to know?
Yes.
Well, I met him probably before you were born.
Go on.
Trying to figure out what year it was. 1928.
I was born by that time.
I met John in Lake Tahoe. John was living in a little house next to a hatchery. His job was to take care of the grounds and feed the fish. On the door of his cottage was a sign, Piscatorial Obstetrician. I thought that was so funny. My sister Idelle and I walked in the door and we wanted to see the fish. John gave us a tour, calling himself a midwife to the lady trouts. Anyway, he and his roommate, Shelby Lloyd, got the idea of asking us out on a date that night, me and my sister. You really want to hear this?
Sure.
Well, anyway, you probably don't want to know about my first date with John.
Sure I do. He was probably very handsome and he probably didn't have any money.
What?
He probably didn't have any money.
Well, that's right. And John was a very, very handsome back then, but not really handsome. handsome. He had a big nose, but a great body and tremendous manly strength. He and his roommate took us to a place in Tahoe City called the Bucket of Blood.
Was that a nice place?
It was a dump. But we had fun dancing and drinking bootleg whiskey. But we had 3 flat tires on the way back to the resort. After that, John and I saw each other every day until my sister and I had to go back to San Francisco. I was working for the San Francisco Chronicle at the time. Then John moved to San Francisco.
Because he wanted to be close to you?
No, actually, he was fired from his job. I think he cracked up the boss's car. He did want to move into my flat, but my mother decided to come to stay with me for a month, so that put an end to that. John ended up renting a garret off Powell Street. But we had a lot of fun in those days. For 5 cents, we could take the streetcar to Ocean Beach. Out there was Playland, the Penny Arcade, the Sutro saltwater baths. Sometimes we invited John up for dinner. He would sit there in his V-neck and baggy corduroys and read from his latest novel in progress.
It must have been tough if he didn't have a real job.
Oh, he had a job sometimes. In warehouses and working in the sugar factory at Spreckles. His father gave him $50 a month. But John was only happy when he had a pencil in his hand. My mother didn't like him. She said, "You'll never be important to him. All he cares about is his writing." "But Mom," I said, I care about his writing too. "But he will not love you. He has not even bought you dinner. He's a bum." But we did get married in 1929, the same year the stock market crashed. None of our families attended the wedding ceremony. We went to a justice of the peace. Our honeymoon was in the Pacific Grove cottage that his parents owned. I remember that for a whole week, we didn't even have enough money for food.
Yeah, my mother and I called it the dirty 30s. We were always broke too. My mother, my grandmother, and I moved from LA to Chicago and back. I had to start working when I was 16 and any job I could get. Dancing in chorus lines, singing, waiting tables. I didn't even know my father. I met him once when I was 14. I was a good cook, though. Everyone liked my cooking and my singing. So what did you do for food?
We went fishing. Monterey Bay was just 2 blocks away. Ever had sea cucumber soup? With kelp? Hey, I had a garden and we'd plant potatoes, but we never ate the skins. We'd plant the skins right back into the potato patch. Sometimes I'd get a job like working as a secretary for the Monterey Chamber of Commerce. But John was always writing, 1,000 words a day, and sometimes we'd have parties, great parties. All of our friends were poor too.
John told me about those parties at Ed Ricketts' lab. He said sometimes they would go on for 3 days.
Yeah. Our friends Toby and Peggy Street, Jean and Bruce Harris, Beth Engels, Rick and Tall Lovejoy. We had fun. Wine at Lottie's was 35 cents a gallon, 50 cents for the special stuff. And the sludge at the bottom never killed anyone. We'd stay up all night reading poetry, and then we'd pile into Ed's car and drive up to Chews Ridge, where we'd all run around naked. I remember a man by the name of Joseph Campbell. Do you know who Joseph Campbell is?
No.
He's a classical scholar, PhD, I think. My sister Idelle introduced him to us. This was about 1933, before Joe was forced to leave town by gunpoint.
Why by gunpoint?
Well, John would have shot Joe Campbell if he didn't. You see, Joseph Campbell and I, one night, Joe and I climbed a tree together. No, actually, we climbed 2 separate trees right in the front yard at the 11th Street house in Pacific Grove. That's where Joe declared his love for me. You know what he said?
What?
"Carol, I know I'm just a visitor in your house, but I think your husband is the outsider. I think John Steinbeck captured the girl I was meant to have married." Those were his exact words. Then he actually caressed my foot while I was in the tree, and John came out of the house and saw us.
And then John ran him off with a shotgun? Oh, why didn't you run off with good old Joe?
because I was already married, stupid. And then again, it wouldn't stop you, would it?
What happened to good old Joe?
Well, he moved to New York, Cambridge to be exact. I didn't want to move to Cambridge. So, what do you do in Hollywood?
Last year I sang in San Francisco at the State Fair on Treasure Island. John said he heard me on the radio. I have a regular job at Brittingham's Radio City restaurant on Sunset Boulevard.
Doing what?
Singing, of course. And then sometimes I get hired as a movie extra, but I have to keep working, you know. My mother and I are still pretty poor. But I'm hoping for my big break in Hollywood.
Well, after Of Mice and Men, John finally got his big break. But for years, nothing John ever wrote sold. He wrote a novel called Green Lady that got scrapped. He finished To an Unknown God, but it got rejected by every publisher we sent it to. Cup of Gold flopped heavily, but it did get published. My mother kept writing me and saying, "When are you going to have children? How come you didn't marry a house painter or an insurance salesman?"
Do you want to have children?
What, me? Have babies? I'd rather have rabies than have babies. I always used to say that. Besides, John's books were always his babies. Let me ask you something. Do you really want him, John Steinbeck? Would you really want to marry a man like John?
I think so.
Let me tell you something about John. He's a mean, sadistic son of a bitch and always wants his own room for writing. He calls it a nest. And once he gets started on something, he wants you to sleep with his goddamn manuscript. You'll never see him and forget about sex. Let me tell you something else about John's family. I mean, his mother and father are dead now, but his sisters, Mary, Beth, and Esther, straight-laced, Bible-thumping, Protestant teetotalers. They're gonna hate you. They'll think you're a floozy. Nobody in the Steinbeck-Hamilton family ever gets a divorce. As it is, they don't like me either.
Why? You seem like a nice person.
Because I'm a communist.
Really?
Yeah, I'm a communist. I believe in the people's cause and all that. You know, President Roosevelt and all the starving farm workers in the Salinas Valley? Also, it used to annoy the hell out of John's mother, Olive. You know, if I hadn't forced John into attending our meetings with the John Reed Society, he would never have written The Grapes of Wrath. Have you read it?
What?
Grapes of Wrath.
Oh, a little bit. John read me the end of the book.
A little bit?
John has told me all about his experiences in the labor camps. You know, when he was traveling around, he told me about the Hoovervilles in Visalia and how he had to sleep in the mud and all those starving fruit pickers from Oklahoma who couldn't find jobs. And when they did find jobs picking peaches or something, they only paid them 15 cents an hour. My God, they couldn't even buy enough food for that. And then when those peach pickers tried to go on strike, the ranchers pulled up the peach trees and planted cotton instead. He read to me about the end of the book, how that woman, Rose of Sharon, would deliver a dead baby in the barn and how she would give her breast milk to a starving man. He said it was hard to publish his book because of that ending. The publisher didn't like it.
Did he tell you who came up with the title?
No, he said that it took him 8 months to write The Grapes of Wrath. He said it was the hardest thing he's ever done.
Hard? Yes, it was hard. Hard for me. Yeah, about the time we sent it off to Viking Press, we moved to the Brush Ranch in the Santa Cruz Mountains because John wanted more privacy. At the same time, we were building a new house. I got strep throat. Then John's publisher, Covici, went bankrupt. Then all of a sudden, John wanted to entertain his Hollywood friends at the ranch. Guess who had to do all the cooking?
But aren't you happy that The Grapes of Wrath is published on the bestseller list? They're even going to make it into a Hollywood movie. And John is now famous even in Hollywood.
Yeah, but who gets all the credit? I busted my butt for that novel every day. Every day I was typing his first draft while he was writing his second draft. God damn it, John, I would tell him. Didn't you ever learn to spell? Have you ever heard of punctuation, paragraphs? Have you ever heard of a plot? Do you have to write so goddamn small? I'm going blind trying to read this thing. And anyway, Nobody wants to read about Tom Joad's philosophy of life. Something has to happen in this book. We need action, and give the novel a decent title. The Oklahomans is not a title.
But John dedicated the whole book to you.
Once. My name was mentioned once in the preface, to Carol, who willed this book. He's now writing a book about the Sea of Cortez. I'll bet he won't even mention me once, and I was on that trip.
Did you hear a car door slam?
No.
I think I'm ready to come out of the bathroom now. Are you going to be nice to me if I come out? I think I could use a little of that champagne.
Sure. I'll even give you safe passage. My bladder is about to explode. Now get the hell out of there!
Scene 3. Carol and Gwyn are sitting in the living room with champagne glasses. Gwyn is now wrapped in John's discarded coat. One empty champagne bottle is on the coffee table.
So what exactly do you sing?
Irish ballads. I write my own music. I've written 24 songs based on Irish poetry.
You write poetry?
Oh, I put poetry into music. I play the organ, too. Is there any heat in this place?
Well, there's a wall heater over there, but it doesn't work.
I thought I heard a car. Oh, I guess I didn't. Would you like to hear one of my songs? It's called Molly Malone. In Dublin's fair city, where girls are so pretty, I first set my eyes on sweet Molly Malone, as she wheeled her wheelbarrow through the streets broad and narrow, crying cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh. She was a fishmonger, and sure 'twas no wonder, so was her father and mother before, and they both wheeled their barrows through the streets broad and narrow, crying cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh. And she died of a fever, and no one could save her, and that was the end of sweet Molly Malone. But her ghost wheels her barrow through the streets broad and narrow, crying cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh.
Alive, alive, oh. Alive, alive, oh. Crying cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh. You didn't write that song.
That's true. But I did sing it for Columbia Broadcasting Studios, and they said they would make a recording, but they never did.
Champagne?
Oh.
All right. I can recite one of my poems. I dedicated this poem to Dorothy Parker. You do know who Dorothy Parker is, don't you?
I think so. She's a poet, right?
Right. So here's how it goes. A shepherd lad came piping, adown from over the hill. For him I tore my cap off and tossed it over the mill. Gaily I followed his piping through the meadows far and near. But when at last he left and took my watch as a souvenir. Next I loved a madcap boy, reckless and proud his sway. With ice and fire he scored my heart, and then he rode away. But he has not forgot me. I know he holds me dear, for on his wall is hanging my little pink brassiere.
That's swell.
I sent off a booklet of my mimeograph poems to a publisher under the name of Amnesia Glasscock, but I never heard back.
Why Amnesia Glasscock?
Well, I wanted to be somebody other than Carol Henning Steinbeck. I wanted to be someone special in my own right.
You know, John picked me up at the airport today, and he took me to meet Ed Ricketts.
You met Ed Ricketts?
I'd never even been to Cannery Row, but that's what they call it, right? Oh, I've heard so much about Ed Ricketts. Ed spent most of his time talking to John about the Sea of Cortez book. But you know, I thought Ed had the most beautiful eyes and his hands. Oh, he had those long, delicate fingers like a piano player. He offered me a cup of coffee and a shot of whiskey, and then we had eggs and cured ham. Ed asked me about my life. How's your life going? Like he really cared, and I told him all about it, and he seemed to have really cared. He kept saying very slowly, that's good, and nodding his head. And then we listened to some music by Mozart on his record player, and he showed me a book that he was writing on ocean invertebrates. He told me things like communities and interdependence on all living things. He was almost Jesus. He was so wonderful.
Well, yes, Ed loves marine invertebrates, but he ain't no Jesus. He also loves women. Any woman. He's not selective. He keeps a blanket in the back seat of his car. It had once been red, but now it's kind of a salmon pink. It's all stained and full of grass seed. I can proudly say I have never been on that blanket, but I know plenty of Monterey women who have. You were lucky you were with John. Ed once told me that the only kind of woman he doesn't make a play for are women with thin lips. Ed also told me he made love once to a woman with 2 vaginas.
2 vaginas? Oh, my goodness. But you went on that trip he took to the Sea of Cortez. John is writing a book about that right now. That's what John and Ed were talking about.
I was the only woman on board the Western Flyer. That was the name of the Purse Seiner boat. But I stayed away from John and Ed. They didn't want much to do with me. They spent all their time digging things out of the rocks and cutting things up and stuffing them into jars and labeling them and stuff. My job was supposed to be the cook, but the crew started complaining about the hamburger meat I cooked for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. One of the crew caught a bonito and asked me how to cook it. I said, how in the hell am I supposed to know how to fix this thing? So Sparky did the cooking for the rest of the 5 weeks. But I had to swab the decks, clean the galley, and row the dinghies around. I had fun with the crew. I also got pretty seasick on the way back to Monterey.
Do you think John will be back soon?
Hope so. I want to get back to the ranch. I hate this place. It gives me the willies. You know, in the back room are a bunch of butcher hooks and empty rabbit hutches. I think they used to butcher rabbits in the back. I wonder what else they butchered.
Oh, I love your ranch, though. I mean, the day I was there, John showed me your swimming pool, and he said he bought a cow. Your garden is full of vegetables, and the pear and apple trees were in full bloom. John said you make your own butter and your own cheese. Oh, I think that's wonderful. John told me that Hollywood people have come there to visit, like Charlie Chaplin and Lon Chaney, and even Spencer Tracy. Your home seems oh so wonderful.
Yeah, until a couple of years ago. 1938 to be exact. Everything started to go south. You know, when John and I were first married, he promised me the moon. You know, my own swimming pool, a fur coat, my name lit up in lights. Suddenly we had all those things, and we are both miserable.
Why?
Well, for one thing, a lot of people hate his guts now. The Association of Farmers in Salinas and me. And he hates being famous. I hate it too. So let's get this over with. Do you want the son of a bitch?
Yes.
Why? After all I've told you?
Yes. Because I know that I have what you don't have. I know John's a serious writer, but he likes a good time. You don't give him that anymore. He needs kindness, understanding, and companionship. I remember meeting you at Robert Benchley's party 2 years ago. You started yelling and about something, calling him a crazy son of a bitch and all of that. Maybe you were drunk, but I saw that you slugged John right in the face, and then you walked out. You unmanned him in front of everyone. I want John to feel like a man. John needs a home.
I give John a home all the time. He doesn't like staying anywhere longer than 2 years. You'll see what that's like. He always got ants in his pants. And when he starts to lose his inspiration with his writing, you won't want to be around him. A back rub and chicken soup will not do the trick.
I'll take him anyway. When John gets back, can I tell him he gets me?
I'm going into the bedroom now and pack my shit. So John can take me up to Los Gatos. I wish you all the luck in the world. I don't think you will be happy.
Are you going to divorce him?
I don't know. But I'll tell you one thing. John and I haven't had sex for 3 years. I'm sure that's not the case with you.
No, it isn't. It isn't at all. But for a long time, we didn't do anything. I mean, it was at least a year before
Oh,
we
don't tell me about it. He may not marry you, you know. He didn't really want to marry me to begin with, and I may not give him a divorce. You know, he's not a faithful kind of a guy.
I'll stick with him anyway. I love him, probably more than he loves me, and that's okay. I'll always stick with him no matter what. Are you going to shoot John with your shotgun when you get home tonight?
No.
Well, good. What will you do after this?
When I get home, I'll have a couple of vodkas and think about it. I'll have to figure out how much money we have. That's important, you know, because we've always been broke and now we're not. Then I'll have to get over not being married to John Steinbeck anymore. There must be something more to life than being Mrs. John Steinbeck, but I don't know what it is. You know, someday John will realize his best work was with me. Someday John will be very, very sorry that I let him go. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'd like to go back to school and become an auto mechanic. I've always wanted to do that.